The sun had barely cleared the rooftops in Georgia, painting the sky with the soft hues of dawn, when Victor Malone stepped onto his porch. A mug of coffee warmed his hands, its rich aroma mingling with the crisp morning air, and a mental list of weekend projects unfurled in his mind. Patching the fence, trimming the hedges, perhaps tackling that Yankee light in the garage. This was the kind of slow Saturday that had drawn him to this house just 2 months ago. A corner lot, a generous 2-car driveway, a grand old oak tree guarding the front, and, most importantly, the promise of peace. But then he saw it. A beige SUV, parked brazenly, undeniably, in his driveway, as if it belonged there. Victor froze, the coffee mug halfway to his lips. He blinked, once, twice, then tilted his head slightly, as if his eyes might be playing tricks on him. But no, there it was, driver's side facing the street, rear tires kissing the very edge of his garage. No note. No person in sight. Just sitting there, abandoned, like someone had left it for a valet service that never arrived. At first, he tried to rationalize it. A delivery driver, perhaps. Someone dropping something off, got turned around, and would be back any minute. But 20 minutes bled into an hour, and the SUV remained a stubborn, unwelcome fixture. Finally, a prickle of irritation urging him on, Victor walked over and checked the license plates. That's when the pieces clicked into place. It was the same beige SUV he'd seen parked crookedly along the curb at recent HOA meetings, adorned with those earnest, slightly saccharine bumper stickers proclaiming, "Good neighbors build great communities." He didn't know her name, but he recognized the woman who drove it. Short, in her late 50s, with cropped hair, always hurrying with a clipboard tucked under her arm, as if perpetually late for some self-assigned, unofficial duty. Victor let out a long sigh, the peaceful Saturday dissolving into a potential prelude to drama. He was new here, just 2 months in, and clashing with a neighbor over a driveway was far from how he envisioned settling into his new community. He wanted harmony, not confrontation. So, when he saw her the very next morning, walking briskly down the sidewalk, that ubiquitous clipboard clutched under her arm, he called out, his voice modulated to be polite, approachable. "Excuse me, She stopped, turning with a swift, almost military precision. Her bright blue track jacket stood out against the muted sidewalk, and her aviator sunglasses reflected the morning sun. Her smile, however, was tight, stretched thin like a shoelace pulled too taut. "Yes?" she asked, her voice clipped. Victor pointed toward his driveway, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Is that your SUV?" She squinted, her smile widening just a fraction, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, yes. Just left it there for a bit. I usually park at the end of the block during my morning walk, but the curb was full." Victor paused, choosing his words with deliberate care, aiming for polite firmness. "Right. It's just that's my driveway." "Oh, I know," she interjected, her tone dismissive, as if this were a triviality. "I figured it wouldn't be a problem. Just for 20 minutes or so." Victor offered a polite chuckle, a sound he hoped didn't betray his burgeoning irritation. "Well, I do use it. I mean, it's part of my house." She tilted her head, a gesture that conveyed she found him to be the difficult one. "I didn't think anyone would mind. I'm part of the HOA board. We usually keep things flexible around here." Flexible. Victor wasn't sure what kind of HOA she thought this was, but he knew precisely what his driveway was, and what it definitely wasn't, a public parking lot. Still, he kept his voice even, his expression calm. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't park there again." Her smile returned, but it was the same tight, unyielding smile that failed to touch her eyes. "Sure, no problem." For a few days, she actually kept her word. Victor allowed himself a sliver of hope, thinking perhaps the message had landed. But then, on Thursday morning, he stepped out to find the beige SUV there again. Same spot. Same angle. Parked with the same audacious confidence, as if their conversation had never occurred. He didn't bother seeking her out this time. Instead, he simply took a photo, a silent, growing record of the transgression, texted it to himself, and backed his own car out, a little too carefully, his bumper missing hers by barely 4 inches. That evening, he saw her again at the HOA meeting, speaking loudly about community standards and property value preservation. She never once looked in his direction. But when he got home that night, a flyer had been meticulously taped to his front door, lawn maintenance guidelines. Victor stared at it, then let out a sharp, bitter laugh. The edges of his grass were, perhaps, half an inch uneven. Definitely not a crime in a suburb where half the houses hadn't been power washed since the Bush administration. So, it was a game now. And Victor, who hated games, felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Games get real fast when people stop listening. And Caroline, clearly, wasn't interested in listening at all. Saturday morning arrived again, draped in the deceptively peaceful light of a new day. But this time, Victor was ready. The night before, he had deliberately parked his car flush against the garage door, leaving the rest of the driveway empty, a silent, daring invitation. Not because he expected her, but because he knew, with a grim certainty, that she would take the bait. And sure enough, at precisely 7:13 a.m., Caroline's beige SUV rolled up like clockwork, no hesitation. She pulled in, clicked the hazard lights on, stepped out with her earbuds firmly in place, her omnipresent clipboard tucked under her arm, and began her power walk down the sidewalk as if she were auditing the very soul of the neighborhood. Victor waited. 30 seconds, just enough time for her to round the corner. Then he walked over and stood by her car, arms folded, staring at it as if contemplating whether to report it or, with a sudden, primal urge, push it into the street himself. He then heard the faint sound of approaching footsteps. She came jogging back around the corner, earbuds now out, her eyebrows lifted in feigned surprise, as if he were the one out of line. "Is something wrong?" she asked, panting slightly. "I'm almost done with my walk." Victor looked at her, then at the offensive SUV. "We talked about this last week." She wiped her forehead with the sleeve of her jacket, a theatrical sigh escaping her lips. "I know, but the street's packed again, and I was just going around the block. I didn't want to be late for my HOA duties." He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "You realize this is private property, right? Like, this isn't overflow parking." Caroline blinked at him, genuinely baffled, as if he were speaking a foreign language. "Are you being serious right now?" Victor tilted his head, holding her gaze. "Would you park in someone else's driveway on the street?" She didn't answer. He waited a beat, then added, his voice firming, "Look, I've got errands. I can't keep working around someone else's car. I've been polite, but this is getting disrespectful." Caroline let out a breath, as if she were the truly inconvenienced party here. "I've lived here for 15 years. I've never had a neighbor treat me like this." Victor's eyebrows went up, a silent challenge. "You mean, tell you not to park in their driveway?" She didn't respond to that, simply walked around to her driver's side door, muttering something about courtesy and new folks with no community spirit. Victor didn't say anything else. He just watched her pull out, her tires squealing a little as she reversed. She paused halfway down the street, rolled her window down, and called out, "Maybe you should come to more HOA meetings. Might help you settle in better." He didn't answer. He just went inside and closed the door. Later that afternoon, he recounted the absurd exchange to his cousin, Donnell, over the phone. "Brew," Donnell said, laughing into the receiver. "You sure you didn't move into one of those Stepford neighborhoods?" Victor chuckled, but shook his head. "I just didn't think I'd have to defend my driveway, man. I got enough going on. Work's a beast, and I just want to cut my grass and watch ESPN without someone treating my house like a damn parking lot." Donnell, ever practical, offered a solution that made Victor pause. "Get a sign. Private property. Tow away zone. Post it right where she parks." Victor considered it, but a part of him was still clinging to the hope that it wouldn't come to that. Until Monday morning. He was halfway out the door, lunch packed, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, when he stopped cold. The SUV was back. This time, it wasn't even centered. It was crooked, as if she'd rushed in and didn't care if she blocked half the sidewalk. A newspaper sat on her windshield. She hadn't even bothered to take it in. Victor didn't bother looking for her. He just pulled out his phone, snapped another picture, and opened the HOA contact list he'd been given in his welcome packet. He found the general inbox, typed a short, terse email, attached the photos, and hit send. Then, he installed a Ring camera facing the driveway. That night, there was no response from the HOA. But there was a knock on the door around 7:30 p.m. Victor opened it to find Caroline standing on his porch, a sheet of paper in her hand and a look on her face that made it clear she knew. "I got your email," she said, her voice strained. "You didn't have to go that route. You could have spoken to me directly." "I did," Victor said, his voice calm, unflappable. She waved the paper a little, a gesture of indignant accusation. "This feels aggressive." He crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "So does blocking my driveway 3 times in 1 week." They stared at each other in silence for a moment, the tension thick between them. Caroline's face tightened, a mask of forced civility. "I'll make sure not to park there again," she said. "I hope we can move past this." Victor nodded once. "That's all I ever wanted." She turned and walked away. Victor stood in the doorway for a few seconds longer, the silence around him suddenly very loud. But when someone truly believes the rules don't apply to them, they don't usually stop after a single warning. He knew, with a deep certainty, this wasn't over. For a week, nothing happened. Victor actually thought, maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. No SUV, no anonymous flyers, no awkward, feigned friendly encounters. Just work, yard work, and quiet evenings watching basketball with his feet up. He even caught himself thinking, maybe she just needed that push. Maybe she finally got the message. Then, one afternoon, as he pulled into his driveway, something fluttered near the mailbox. A neon orange card stuck into the crack between the wood and the slot. Yard appearance infraction notice. Victor stared at it for a long moment before pulling it out. His grass wasn't long, his hedges weren't wild. The card was a generic form letter with checkboxes, and one was marked, uneven edging along walkway. Please address within 5 business days. Victor looked up and down the block. Half the houses had worse lawns than his, including the bungalow across the street where old Mr. Jennings hadn't mowed since Memorial Day. Victor's walkway was tidy, nothing egregious. This felt personal. He didn't even bother calling the HOA this time. Instead, he grabbed a pair of garden shears, tidied the edge just for show, and let it go. He wasn't going to feed her game. Not yet. But things kept happening. Quiet things. Petty things. One morning, his trash bins were dragged 2 feet into the street instead of left flush to the curb. Another day, someone chalked a big arrow on the sidewalk pointing to his house with the words "needs power washing" scrawled beside it. And then there was the dog poop. 2 separate days, same spot, right on the edge of his front walkway. No bag. No cleanup. It was all small stuff, maddeningly petty stuff, but it built up, insidious and relentless, like water dripping slowly into a cup. Victor started keeping a notebook, dates, times, little things he noticed. Nothing major enough to make a fuss about individually, but together, it painted a clear, unsettling picture. The final straw came during a Zoom meeting at work. He was at his desk, deep into a coding sprint, when his doorbell rang. It was 11:30 a.m. He checked the Ring feed. Caroline was standing there, arms crossed, looking directly into the camera. He hesitated, then answered through the intercom. "Can I help you?" Her tone was sweet. Too sweet. "Hey there. I noticed your recycling bin was left out past 10 a.m. again. Just wanted to give you a heads up. It's in the HOA handbook." Victor blinked. "You rang my doorbell for that." "I figured a friendly reminder would be better than another notice," she chirped. "Got it," Victor said, his voice flat. "I'll make sure to set an alarm." She smiled, then leaned in a little, her eyes glinting. "Just trying to keep the neighborhood looking nice." The Ring camera caught everything. Her face, her tone, the faint, triumphant smirk she wore as she walked away. Victor sat back in his chair and exhaled, a long, slow breath. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't being sensitive. This was calculated. He called his friend Donnell that night. Donnell lived a few hours away in Columbus and had spent the last 2 years dealing with his own HOA nightmares. Victor laid it all out. She's not yelling, she's not threatening, but it's this constant slow burn, like she's trying to remind me I don't quite fit. Donnell didn't miss a beat. You know what you're dealing with, right? Victor didn't say anything. She sees you as temporary, Donnell continued, his voice grim. Like your name's written in pencil, and hers is in pen. Victor stared at his notebook, at the mounting evidence of petty warfare. I'm not going anywhere. Then start acting like it, Donnell said, his voice firm. You pay dues like everybody else. You got receipts. Time to stop playing defense. Victor didn't respond right away, but later that night, he ordered 2 metal signs online: private property, driveway parking by permit only. Violators will be towed. And just beneath it, in bold, this is not a public parking space. He posted one by the garage, the other at the end of the driveway near the sidewalk. 2 days later, someone peeled one of them halfway off the post. Victor laughed when he saw it, a mirthless, determined sound. But this time, he didn't just take a photo. He called the towing company and asked them exactly what they needed to enforce a tow. He was done asking. Because when someone parks on your property after being told not to, repeatedly, it's no longer a misunderstanding. It's a message. Victor didn't sleep much that night. Not because he was worried, he was past that. But because his brain wouldn't stop running the scenarios. How many times did he have to ask nicely? How long would he be expected to be the bigger person before that expectation just became silence? By morning, the decision was made. He poured his coffee, opened the blinds, and almost laughed when he saw the beige SUV creeping down the street again, like clockwork. It paused briefly in front of his driveway, then eased in, with the same careless angle, the same infuriating confidence, as if the signs he'd posted meant nothing. Victor walked outside while she was still getting out. The game was over. The boundaries would now be enforced. Victor genuinely hoped that was the end of it. After the first tow, there had been 3 gloriously quiet days. No beige SUV, no anonymous notes slipped under his doormat, no awkward, feigned friendly knocks. Caroline seemed to have vanished, as if she'd gone on a retreat to process the profound public embarrassment. Victor actually started to exhale, allowing himself to believe that perhaps, finally, the message had truly landed. Then Tuesday morning rolled around. Victor opened his door, lunch bag in one hand, work laptop in the other, only to stop cold. There it was. The beige SUV. Back. Same spot. Same defiant angle. Same blatant, infuriating disrespect. Except this time, it was almost parked deeper, its nose practically touching his garage door, as if to say, "What are you going to do? Tow me again." Victor stared at it for a moment, blinking, as if he'd woken up in some kind of Groundhog Day loop, perpetually trapped in a battle for his own driveway. Then, with a calm born of utter exhaustion, he pulled out his phone, calmly dialed the same towing company, and said, simply, "She's back." They didn't even ask many questions this time. They knew the address. While he waited, Victor went inside and poured himself a coffee. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shocked. He was just done. 15 minutes later, the tow truck arrived, the same driver as before. Caroline must have seen it from down the street, because she came sprinting toward the house slippers flapping, her face a mask of pure panic. She wore a full face of makeup, but it was at odds with her frantic pace. "Wait! Wait!" she screamed, her voice shrill, robe flapping wildly behind her. The tow truck didn't stop. Victor came outside just as the driver was expertly hooking the front end of the SUV. Caroline nearly tripped over her slippers as she reached the curb, her breath ragged. "You can't do this again. This is harassment. I was only parked here for 20 minutes. Victor didn't even flinch. "Doesn't matter. Signs are posted. You were warned again." She whirled around to face him, her eyes wide with a desperate fury. "I thought we talked about this." Victor kept his voice even, devoid of any emotion. "We did. More than once." The tow truck finished hooking. The driver gave Victor a quick, almost imperceptible nod and began lifting the SUV. Caroline, in a last, desperate attempt, stepped in front of the truck, arms out, as if she could physically block its path. "I live here. You can't treat me like I'm some stranger." Victor raised an eyebrow, his patience now completely depleted. "You parked in my driveway again. After being told not to. Again." She started shouting, her voice rising over the growl of the engine. "You're making this personal. You want to play the victim, but you're just stirring the pot." Victor looked her straight in the eye, his voice cutting through her accusations with cold clarity. "No. I'm enforcing boundaries. You're just not used to hearing no." That's when the neighbor across the street, Deshawn, the retired army vet who'd mostly kept quiet through the whole absurd situation, opened his front door. "You want me to email you this footage too?" he called out, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Caroline froze, her face turning 3 shades of red. Victor turned, confused. "You recording?" Deshawn held up his phone, still grinning. "Been live since she came running out in those slippers." "Turn that off." Caroline snapped, her voice laced with humiliation. "This is a private matter." Deshawn shook his head. "Not on someone else's property, it's not." The tow truck began pulling off slowly, the beige SUV lifted high into the air once again, a public spectacle. Caroline screamed after it, a frustrated combination of unbelievable and lawsuit, then stormed down the street on foot, muttering and crying. Victor didn't say a word. He just stood there, arms folded, watching it all unfold, a quiet witness to the inevitable consequences of unaddressed arrogance. Later that evening, Deshawn knocked on Victor's door. "Yo," he said with a wide smile. "This clip's going nuts. My niece posted it to Twitter and somebody already made a remix with theme music." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Remix?" Deshawn pulled out his phone and showed Victor. "Yeah, like, full soundtrack, drama score, zoom effects, everything." Sure enough, there it was, a short, dramatic video showing Caroline yelling in slow motion while her SUV got lifted into the air, cutting to Victor sipping coffee, then Deshawn's voice from off-screen, "You want me to email you this footage too?" The internet ate it up. 100,000 views in 12 hours. Thousands of comments. "This man deserves an award for patience." Not the slippers again. Boundaries are beautiful. That tow truck is my spirit animal. Victor couldn't help but smile this time. But the smile faded just a little when he checked the HOA portal that night. Still no response to his complaints. Still no formal acknowledgement. Because while some neighbors were laughing, others were watching, and not all of them liked what they saw. That afternoon, the neighborhood app blew up. Someone, a neighbor with a doorbell camera across the street, had caught the entire second tow on video. There was no commentary, no edits, just raw, unvarnished footage of Caroline losing her mind in front of Victor's house. It started getting shared immediately, first within the tight-knit digital confines of the app, then someone clipped it and posted it to Facebook. By evening, it had hit a local suburban drama group on Instagram, spreading like wildfire through the digital veins of the community. The comments were ruthless, a torrent of collective exasperation. Imagine ignoring a sign and a neighbor's warning just to end up getting towed. She thought HOA meant she could park wherever she wanted. Girl, no. That man told her 3 times. You can't even feel bad at that point. Victor didn't say a word. He didn't respond to comments, didn't engage in the heated threads. He just read quietly, sipping his tea, a silent observer of the digital storm he had inadvertently unleashed. But the video didn't stay local for long. By Friday morning, it had amassed 30,000 views. Someone, sensing its universal appeal, uploaded it to TikTok with dramatic music and text overlays. When you think the HOA makes you untouchable. And just like that, it stopped being about driveways and started being about pride, about entitlement, about the clash between ingrained privilege and newfound boundaries. Victor hoped that would be the end of it. He really did. After the tow, there were 3 quiet days. No car. No notes. No knock on the door pretending to be friendly. Caroline had seemingly disappeared, swallowed by the sheer weight of her own embarrassment, as if she'd gone on a silent retreat to process the humiliation. Victor even started to exhale again, allowing himself a tentative breath of peace. The following week, Victor started noticing a subtle, yet undeniable, shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere. At first, it was small, quiet gestures, discreet nods from a few neighbors he hadn't spoken to before, a quick thumbs up from the mail carrier. Deshaun, ever the character, would flash him a knowing grin every time he passed by with his dog, always adding a cheerful, "You're famous now," with a laugh. But then came the cold shoulders, the subtle rebuffs. The woman on the corner, Beatrix something, stopped waving when she watered her roses. The retired couple 2 doors down began pulling their trash cans in without a glance in his direction, their faces averted. One morning, Victor even overheard someone across the hedge mutter the word petty as he mowed his lawn. It was a silent judgment, a whispered condemnation, hanging in the air like an invisible cloud. It didn't take long for the next HOA meeting to roll around. Victor almost didn't go. A part of him, the weary, peace-seeking part, just wanted to retreat, to let the drama fade. But something told him he needed to show up, to bear witness, to stand his ground not just on his driveway, but in the very heart of this community. He walked in, dressed casually in jeans and a polo, took a seat near the back, and sat through 30 minutes of mundane discussion about sprinkler timers and bulk trash schedules. Then, they finally got to new business. That's when Caroline cleared her throat. She looked a little more composed than before, still tight-lipped, but mercifully, no slippers this time. Her hair was curled, her clipboard perfectly balanced in her lap. "I think we need to address what's being shared online," she began, her voice calm but layered with a performative concern, a practiced tone designed to elicit sympathy. "There's been a lot of attention brought to our neighborhood that doesn't reflect who we are." Some people nodded in agreement, a few glanced discreetly at Victor. "I understand there was a disagreement between neighbors," she continued, her gaze pointedly avoiding his. "But having video footage shared without consent, along with personal attacks, is not the kind of image we want associated with our community." Victor raised his hand slowly, quietly, his posture one of quiet command. Caroline tried not to react, but her jaw tightened, a muscle twitching betraying her controlled facade. "I didn't share anything," Victor said calmly, his voice steady and clear. "That was someone else's footage on public property. My driveway is mine. She parked on it multiple times after being told not to." He let that statement settle, its simple truth hanging in the air. Caroline opened her mouth, a retort forming, but he kept going, his words a quiet, undeniable wave. "I filed reports, sent pictures, requested support. I got nothing. But I handled it by the rules." "Your rules?" Silence. Finally, a man from the board, Howard Green, someone who hadn't spoken much before, cleared his throat and spoke up. "Well, if signs were posted and it's private property, then he had the right to tow." Caroline blinked, caught off guard. Another woman, one of the newer residents, chimed in too, her voice carrying a hint of incredulity. "Honestly, it's kind of wild he had to go that far before anyone even backed him up." Victor didn't smile. He wasn't looking for applause, or even explicit validation. He just wanted acknowledgement. After the meeting, a few people stopped him in the parking lot. Some offered quiet encouragement, a brief, knowing nod. Others still avoided his eyes, their discomfort palpable. That was fine. He hadn't moved here to be liked. He'd moved for peace. Back home, Victor sat on his porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, painting the sky in fiery hues. He thought about his dad, a man of simple truths, who used to say, "You can be polite all day, but if someone keeps stepping on your foot, eventually you've got to move it, or they'll break your toe." That's what it was. He hadn't made a scene, he had simply moved his foot. That night, he logged off from the neighborhood app, turned off all notifications, and made a firm decision. From here on out, he would keep his meticulous records, he would stand his ground, and he would let the undeniable footage speak for itself. He didn't need to yell to be heard. He just needed to be clear. And more than anything, he needed his driveway back, a physical embodiment of the peace he sought. Sometimes, the problem isn't that people don't understand your boundaries. It's that they don't respect them. And no amount of HOA titles, forced smiles, or clipboard-wielding power walks gives someone the right to treat your home like theirs. Victor had learned this lesson the hard way, through repeated intrusions and petty harassment. But in doing so, he hadn't just reclaimed a parking space. He had drawn a line, visible and unyielding, that would define his home and his peace for years to come. He had transformed a petty dispute into a quiet, unwavering declaration of self-respect.